When my wife passed away, I thought the worst was behind me, but then her boss called with a message that sent chills down my spine. Mr. Thatcher, come here now. I have something to show you. Don't tell your kids. You'll be in danger. I had no idea what he meant, but something in his voice told me this wasn't a conversation I could ignore. When I walked into his office that morning, I froze upon seeing who was waiting at the door. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and let me know what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this shocking truth has traveled. I never thought that after 45 years of marriage, I would feel like a stranger at my own wife's funeral. But there I was seated in the front pew at Phoenix Memorial Chapel, while my daughter Sky and son-in-law Axel handled every decision as if I didn't exist. Dad just let us handle everything. You're too emotional to think clearly. Sky told me that morning, her voice carrying a patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. Axel nodded beside her with fake concern. I stayed quiet because I didn't have the strength to fight. Bryn had died of a heart attack 3 days earlier, so suddenly I still couldn't process it. One moment she was drinking coffee talking about spring flowers for our garden. The next I found her collapsed in our kitchen. Massive cardiac failure, the paramedics said. At 72, I should have been prepared, but you're never ready to lose your life partner. Everyone approached Sky and Axel for condolences as if they were the primary mourners. I was just the fragile widower who needed protection from trauma. Grandpa is taking this very hard, I heard Sky whisper. We're handling everything. We don't want to burden him. Burden him. That word stung more than any condolence. Bryn never saw me as a burden, but since Sky married Axel 5 years ago, they spoke about me like I was becoming incompetent. During the service, something troubled me. Sky seemed more composed than grieving, responding to consolers with rehearsed control. Axel kept checking his phone, glancing at his watch, like he had somewhere more important to be. After burial people gathered at our Scottsdale home for reception, the house where Bryn and I lived 40 years suddenly felt foreign. Sky and Axel moved like hosts directing caterers, accepting cards, discussing matters in hushed tones, while I sat invisible in my own home. Dad, we've been talking, Sky said, settling across from me with that serious expression. You shouldn't stay in this house alone. It's too big and dangerous now. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? There are wonderful senior living communities nearby, Axel added with his sales pitch voice. Places with people your age, activities, medical care on site. I'm not moving to any nursing home. Sky patted my hand with calculated gentleness. It's not a nursing home, Dad. These are luxury retirement communities. We could visit every weekend. This is my home, I said weakly. My cell phone rang. Axel reached for it, but I grabbed it first. The caller ID showed Morrison and Associates Financial. Mr. Thatcher, Vale Harrison Bryn's boss. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to speak urgently. There's something important you need to know. Sky and Axel watched me intently, their expressions making me uncomfortable. What kind of thing? I can't discuss it over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning at 10? And Mr. Thatcher, this is crucial. Don't mention this conversation to anyone, especially your family members. What I need to show you could put you in serious danger. The line went dead. I stared at the phone with trembling hands. Why would Vale warn me against telling my own family? What could Bryn's boss know that would endanger me? And why did the two people who claimed to love me most suddenly feel like predators, sizing up their prey? The next morning I drove through downtown Phoenix with questions burning in my mind. Morrison and Associates Financial occupied a gleaming 25-story tower. The elevator carried me to the 20th floor where Vale Harrison's corner office commanded a panoramic view of the city below. Vale was 58, a silver-haired man who'd worked alongside Bryn for 15 years. Today, deep worry lines etched his face as he locked the door behind me. Thatcher, what I'm about to show you will change everything, he said, moving to a secure filing cabinet. He withdrew a thick folder marked Confidential in Bryn's familiar handwriting. 8 months ago, your wife came to me with disturbing suspicions. She was scared of her own daughter. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, photographs and documents I'd never seen. The first page bore a date from last spring. They're planning something. I need to document everything. Bryn believed Sky and Axel were systematically preparing to control your life. Vale whispered. Financial manipulation on a massive scale. I stared at power of attorney documents with forged signatures. medical evaluations claiming I had cognitive decline signed by a doctor I'd never met, forms giving Sky complete control over my finances and medical decisions. I never signed these. Bryn knew that. She also knew they planned to use them anyway. Vale showed me Bryn's meticulous documentation. Missing medications that reappeared in different locations, car keys vanishing for hours. She'd recorded everything I'd dismissed as normal forgetfulness. Your wife realized they were creating evidence of memory problems, Vale explained. Bryn's notes revealed conversations with neighbors. Sky had been telling people my memory was failing, that I was becoming confused and forgetful. She'd planted seeds of doubt about my independence throughout our community. Meanwhile, Axel asked pointed questions about insurance policies and property values. He'd inquired about retirement accounts, investments, even our home's market value, all disguised as helping us plan for the future. They stopped talking whenever I appeared. I said pieces clicking together. Your wife noticed. She hired a private investigator 6 months ago. The surveillance reports were chilling. Sky and Axel had researched guardianship laws, visited assisted living facilities, consulted lawyers about elder care. They'd been preparing to remove me from my own life. Why didn't she tell me? She wanted certainty before accusing her daughter of such terrible things, and she feared they'd accelerate their plans if they suspected she knew. Vale closed the folder and looked directly at me. Thatcher, there's someone who can explain this better than I can. Someone who's been watching, waiting for the right moment. My heart raced as Vale walked toward a conference room door. Are you ready for the truth? Because once you hear it, there's no going back. He knocked softly. He's here, he called out. A muffled voice responded from inside, and my heart stopped. That voice, soft and familiar, belonged to someone who was supposed to be lying in a grave at Desert Lawn Cemetery. Someone I'd watched them lower into the ground just yesterday. The conference room door opened with agonizing slowness, and my world tilted off its axis. Bryn stepped out alive and healthy, her familiar blue eyes filled with love and apology. She looked exactly as she had 5 days ago, except for the weight of secrets she'd been carrying. Hello, my love, I'm so sorry, she whispered. My legs gave out. I collapsed into Vale's leather chair, gasping for air as the room spun around me. This couldn't be real. This had to be some cruel hallucination brought on by grief and stress. This isn't possible, I stammered, my voice barely audible. I buried you. I held your hand when you died. I watched them lower your casket into the ground. Bryn rushed to my side, her familiar touch grounding me in reality. These were her hands, warm and real, not the cold fingers I'd kissed goodbye at the funeral home. I know this is shocking, but I had to protect us, she said, kneeling beside my chair. There was no other way. I was torn between overwhelming joy and crushing anger. You let me grieve. You let me plan your funeral. You let me stand at your graveside and say goodbye forever. Tears streamed down her face. I wanted to tell you, but they were watching everything we did. Every phone call, every conversation. If they'd suspected I was alive, they would have killed us both immediately. Vale quietly placed a glass of water on his desk and stepped back, giving us space for this impossible reunion. She's been hiding here in the building for 5 days, he explained softly, waiting for the right moment. I've been staying in the executive suite. Bryn said, her voice steadier now. Vale has been bringing me food updates about you. I watched from the window yesterday as you drove away from the funeral home. But how, I asked, still struggling to accept the evidence of my own eyes. The paramedics, the hospital, the death certificate. Bryn took a shaky breath. I discovered they were slowly poisoning me. Small doses of digitalis in my morning coffee for 3 months. I was having heart palpitations, dizziness, weakness. I thought it was just age catching up with me. My blood turned to ice. They were trying to kill you. The plan was to give me a heart attack that looked completely natural. But I figured it out when I found the empty digitalis bottle in Axel's jacket pocket. That's when I knew we were both in mortal danger. She explained how she'd reached out to her college roommate, Dr. Betty Pierce, who worked at Phoenix General Hospital. Betty had helped stage the fake medical emergency complete with falsified symptoms and a death certificate that would fool everyone, except the 3 people who needed to know the truth. The funeral director, Marcus Torres, owed me a favor from when I helped his daughter get a scholarship. Bryn continued. He arranged for a weighted dummy in the casket. The closed casket ceremony was essential to the deception. I've been staying at Betty's cabin in Flagstaff when I wasn't here, she said, planning, documenting, gathering evidence with Vale and the private investigator. Vale opened another folder on his desk. Your wife has been working with us for months, Thatcher. We've documented systematic financial abuse, gaslighting, and now attempted murder. They weren't just stealing money, Bryn said, her voice hardening. They were preparing to kill us both. You were next on their list. They needed me gone first so you'd be vulnerable and alone. I stared at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 45 years, who'd faked her own death to save our lives. Faking your death was the only way. It was the only way to make them reveal their true intentions. Now they think you're grieving and helpless. They'll move fast to get control of everything. Bryn stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Phoenix. What I discovered about our daughter will break your heart, Thatcher. But you need to see all the evidence before they arrive. Vale checked his watch and moved toward his desk phone. I called them 20 minutes ago. Told them you were here signing insurance papers and seemed confused about the documents. They're on their way now. My stomach dropped. They're coming here. Bryn turned from the window, her expression grim but determined. It's time to spring the trap. Before I could process Bryn's resurrection, Vale moved to a recording device on his credenza. What you're about to hear will destroy any illusions about your family. He pressed play, and Sky's voice filled the office with chilling clarity. Dad's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. Axel responded. The house is worth $750,000, plus his retirement accounts. Once we get power of attorney, we can liquidate everything, Sky continued coldly. What if he fights the competency evaluation? My daughter's laugh was devoid of warmth. He won't be a problem much longer, neither will Mom. My face went white hearing the casual ways she discussed our deaths. This was my little girl whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd paid. There are hours of these conversations, Bryn said softly. They've been planning this for over a year. Vale opened a laptop showing photographs that made my stomach lurch. Screenshots of Axel's online purchases, digitalis, tablets, syringes, medical reference books. Sky's internet searches, undetectable heart attack drugs. Symptoms of dementia in elderly patients. The plan was methodical and horrifying. Kill Bryn first with staged heart attack, then gradually poison me over months. Make it look like grief-induced cardiac failure. Life insurance payouts of $500,000 each, plus our house and retirement accounts. They had a 6-month timeline, Bryn explained. I was supposed to die in March. You were scheduled for August. They were literally counting days until our deaths. I whispered, staring at a calendar with dates circled in red ink. Vale pulled out bank statements that made me dizzy. They've opened 3 credit cards in your name, Thatcher. $45,000 in debt for luxury items you never purchased. Charges at high-end restaurants, designer stores, expensive jewelry. Axel had lost $180,000 at Desert Diamond Casino, while telling us they were struggling financially. Sky spent $30,000 on designer goods last month, Bryn added bitterly, while claiming they couldn't afford groceries. Forged signatures on loan applications looked remarkably like my handwriting. They'd been practicing their fraud while sitting at my dinner table. They've stolen over $85,000 from your accounts, Vale said, intercepting your bank statements for 8 months. The financial theft was nothing compared to systematic gaslighting. Vale showed me hidden camera footage of Sky moving my reading glasses, then acting concerned when I couldn't find them. Axel hiding my keys in the refrigerator, suggesting I was becoming forgetful. They canceled 6 medical appointments without telling you, Bryn said, then told Dr. Martinez you were unreliable. Security footage showed Sky talking to our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, shaking her head sadly. Dad's having more bad days than good ones. We're worried about his safety. They'd been building a guardianship case, collecting statements from neighbors documenting manufactured incidents of confusion. Every stumble, every normal age-related forgetfulness had been weaponized against me. Vale's phone buzzed, his secretary's voice. Mr. Vale, your guests have arrived. Should I send them up? Bryn peered down at the street. They think they're coming to comfort a grieving father confused about insurance paperwork. Instead, they're walking into their own confession, Vale added, activating a recording device. In the distance, elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As we heard footsteps approaching in the hallway, Bryn quickly moved toward the conference room. I need to stay hidden until the right moment, she whispered urgently. Let them dig their own graves first. Vale nodded and gestured for her to slip back into the adjoining room. We'll confront them with the evidence, then reveal you when they're completely trapped. The office door burst open and my daughter Sky strode in with Axel, close behind their faces a mixture of concern and barely concealed irritation. They'd clearly rushed here, probably expecting to find a confused old man signing away his rights. "Dad, what are you doing here? We've been looking everywhere for you," Sky said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of exaggerated worry she'd perfected over the years. Axel's eyes darted around the office suspiciously. "Mr. Vale, why did you call us here?" "You said something about insurance paperwork and Dad being confused." Vale remained seated behind his desk, his expression professionally neutral. "Your father wanted to discuss some financial matters. I thought it would be appropriate for family to be present." What they didn't know was that hidden cameras were rolling, recording every word, every expression, every telltale sign of guilt that would soon surface. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, not from age, but from rage that had been building for months. "I know what you've been doing." Sky immediately shifted into her caretaker persona. "Dad, you're confused. This isn't the place for you right now. Let's go home and get you some rest." She moved toward me with those practiced gestures of concern, but I stepped back. Vale placed the thick evidence folder on his conference table with a deliberate thud that made both Sky and Axel flinch. Axel's eyes widened as he recognized some of the documents spilling out. Bank statements, credit card bills, photographs. His face went pale. "Whatever lies people have been telling you." "Dad, you can't believe them," Sky said quickly, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "These aren't lies," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "These are bank records, credit card statements, all in my name, all signed with forged versions of my signature." Vale methodically spread the evidence across his table like a prosecutor presenting his case. Credit card statements showing $45,000 in charges I'd never made. Gambling receipts from Desert Diamond Casino, totaling $180,000 in Axel's name. "We can explain those," Sky said desperately. "They were emergency expenses. Medical bills, home repairs, things you forgot about." I picked up a receipt and waved it in front of her face. $30,000 at Tiffany & Company is a medical emergency. Axel tried a different approach. "You don't understand the financial pressure we're under, Thatcher. We were trying to protect the family assets, make sure everything was secure for your future." That's when Vale played his ace. He pressed a button on his recording device, and their own voices filled the room with crystal clarity. "He won't be a problem much longer, neither will Mom." The silence that followed was deafening. Both Sky and Axel went rigid, trapped by their own words echoing in the sterile office air. "That recording is taken out of context," Sky stammered, but the confidence had completely drained from her voice. "We were just discussing hypothetical scenarios," Axel added weakly. "Estate planning, you know. Everyone talks about inheritance planning." "Inheritance planning." I roared, finding strength I didn't know I still possessed. "You were planning to poison us. You already tried to kill your mother with a digitalis." Sky's mask finally slipped completely. "Dad, you're being paranoid and delusional. This is exactly what we've been trying to tell people about your mental state. You're not thinking clearly. Even caught red-handed, she was still trying to gaslight me, still trying to make me doubt my own reality." "Actually," a familiar voice said from behind them, "his mind is perfectly clear." The conference room door opened, and both Sky and Axel turned, probably expecting a lawyer or security guard. Instead, they saw something impossible, something that made Axel's face go white as paper. "What the hell?" he whispered. Sky's scream pierced the air, raw and primal, the sound of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse in real time. The color drained from both their faces as they stared at Bryn in complete disbelief. Axel stumbled backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "This is impossible," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We saw you die. I watched the paramedics work on you." Sky was shaking her head violently as if she could make this nightmare disappear through sheer denial. "The funeral, the burial, the death certificate. This can't be real." Bryn stepped fully into the room, her expression cold as winter steel. "Disappointed I'm not actually dead. Sorry to ruin your inheritance timeline. Mom," Sky stammered, trying desperately to regain control of the situation. "We can explain everything. This is all a terrible misunderstanding." "Explain how you poisoned my coffee for months." Bryn's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Explain the digitalis you bought online. Explain how you plan to make my husband's death look like grief-induced cardiac failure." Faced with overwhelming evidence and the impossible sight of their supposedly dead victim, Axel cracked first. The weight of months of deception and guilt came crashing down on him. It wasn't supposed to go this far. He blurted out, tears streaming down his face. The gambling debts, they were threatening to break my legs. We were desperate. Shut up, Axel, Sky hissed. Don't say anything else. But the dam had broken. They already know everything, Axel shouted back at her. The recordings, the bank statements, the poisoned purchases. We're finished. He turned to us with wild eyes. The casino loans, they had interest rates that were killing us. We owed money to people who don't accept late payments. We thought if we could just get access to your accounts temporarily. Temporarily? Bryn laughed bitterly. By murdering us. Sky finally snapped her mask of false concern completely shattered. We just needed you both out of the way. The money was going to be ours eventually anyway. You're both old. You don't need all that wealth just sitting in accounts. The cold calculation in her voice was more chilling than any scream. Vale had quietly pressed a button under his desk during the confrontation. Within minutes, the office door opened and Detective Maria Santos entered with 2 uniformed officers. Sky Thatcher. Axel Thatcher, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and financial fraud. Detective Santos announced, pulling out her handcuffs. This is entrapment, Sky screamed as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Those recordings are illegal. You can't use them in court. Actually, Detective Santos replied calmly, it's evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent, though you've already said quite enough. I watched in stunned silence as my own daughter was led away in handcuffs, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor of the office building. News crews had somehow already gathered outside their cameras, flashing as Sky and Axel were escorted to separate police cars. 2 weeks later, I sat in a Phoenix courthouse that buzzed with media attention. The charges were read aloud: conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, elder abuse, wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted poisoning. The list seemed to go on forever. Sky and Axel had pled not guilty and were now blaming each other for the entire scheme. Sky claimed Axel had manipulated her into going along with his desperate plans. Axel insisted that Sky had been the mastermind, using his gambling addiction as leverage to control him. When I took the witness stand to testify about the systematic abuse, the gaslighting, the financial theft, I looked directly at Sky. She stared back with eyes that held no remorse, only anger at being caught. The judge denied bail for both defendants. Given the calculated nature of these crimes and the clear danger posed to the victims, I consider both defendants to be flight risks and a continued threat to community safety. As court adjourned, I approached Sky one final time before she was led back to her holding cell. You're no longer my daughter, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart. She looked at me with pure hatred. Good. I never wanted a father who was too selfish to die when it was convenient. That afternoon, Bryn and I stood on our front lawn in Scottsdale as a real estate agent hammered a for sale sign into the desert landscaping we'd maintained for 40 years. We can't stay here with all these memories, I said, watching our neighbors peek through their curtains at the spectacle our lives had become. Bryn took my hand and squeezed it gently. I know the perfect place for a fresh start. 6 months later, I sat on the wooden porch of our small adobe house in Sedona, watching the morning sun paint the red rock mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The silence here wasn't the oppressive quiet of grief and suspicion that had filled our Scottsdale home. This was the peaceful silence of safety and genuine contentment. Bryn emerged from our kitchen carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her face glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in years. Her garden was already blooming despite the desert climate, testament to her determination to create beauty wherever we planted our roots. Clay and Belle invited us for dinner tonight, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Belle's making her famous pot roast. Our neighbors had become genuine friends, something we'd forgotten was possible after years of wondering which smiles were real and which masked hidden agendas. Clay was 68, a retired high school principal with laugh lines earned from decades of working with teenagers. Belle, 65, had been a pediatric nurse before retirement, her gentle nature a balm to souls that had been battered by betrayal. For the first time in years, we feel truly safe, I told Bryn, reaching over to squeeze her hand. No one here wants anything from us except friendship. Our days had settled into simple pleasures that felt revolutionary after the complexity of our previous life. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks through the desert trails, conversations that didn't require us to decode hidden meanings or watch for signs of manipulation. We were finally living for ourselves, not in constant fear of the people who were supposed to love us most. The final court resolution had come through last month. Sky received 4 years in state prison for attempted murder conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. Axel got 6 years for the same charges plus additional counts related to his gambling debts and money laundering. They'd divorced while awaiting sentencing, each blaming the other in bitter court filings that made headlines in the Phoenix newspapers. The judge had ordered restitution of $120,000, though we knew we'd likely never see most of that money. The district attorney had called it the most calculated elder abuse case in county history. While the judge's final words still echoed in my mind, "Your betrayal of parental trust is beyond comprehension." What surprised me most was how quickly we'd found community among other survivors. Clay had shared his own painful story during one of our early conversations. "We cut ties with our son 8 years ago," he'd told us over dinner. "Drug addiction, constant stealing manipulation that nearly destroyed our marriage." Belle had nodded sadly. He'd show up crying, promising he'd changed, begging for just one more chance. We gave him dozens of chances before we realized we were enabling his destruction of our family. "It was the hardest decision we ever made," Clay continued, "but it saved our marriage and probably our lives. Some people choose paths you simply can't follow, no matter how much you love them." I'd found myself opening up in ways I never expected. I never thought I'd have to choose between my child and my life. But some people become so toxic that loving them means destroying yourself. We'd started attending a support group for elder abuse survivors, meeting other parents who'd been victimized by their own children. The stories were heartbreakingly similar: financial theft, emotional manipulation, systematic campaigns to isolate and control elderly parents for monetary gain. During quiet moments like these, I often reflected on the journey that had brought us here, and I spent 35 years raising her with love, teaching her right from wrong, trying to be the best father I could be, I said to Bryn. Never imagined she'd repay that by planning our murders. Bryn's expression was thoughtful as she watched a roadrunner dart between the desert plants. "We did everything right as parents, Thatcher. We loved her, supported her, gave her every opportunity to become a good person. Sometimes good parents still raise children who choose evil," I said. "It's not our failure, it's theirs." The mail truck's engine broke the morning quiet, and our carrier waved as he approached with the day's delivery. Most of our mail now consisted of utility bills and gardening catalogs, a refreshing change from the legal documents and court notices that had dominated our lives for months. But today was different. Among the routine correspondence was an envelope that made my blood run cold. The return address read Arizona State Prison, with Sky's name printed in the corner. I stared at the letter, my hands trembling slightly. Bryn noticed immediately. "You don't have to read it," she said gently, her voice carrying the same protective tone she'd used when shielding me from painful truths in the past. I turned the envelope over in my hands, feeling its weight. But maybe I should know what she has to say. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, Bryn watching quietly from her chair as I unfolded the handwritten pages. Sky's familiar handwriting looked smaller, somehow less confident, than the bold signature she'd once used to forge my name on financial documents. "Dear Dad, I know you probably never want to see me again, and I understand why. Prison has given me time to think about what I became, and I'm horrified by the person staring back at me in the mirror." I continued reading, my emotions swinging between hope and skepticism with each sentence. "The therapy sessions here are helping me understand the depth of my selfishness and cruelty. I've been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, but that's not an excuse for what I did to you and Mom. Mental illness doesn't make someone evil. I chose greed over family money, over love and convenience, over human decency." The letter went on for 3 pages, each paragraph revealing more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from my daughter in 35 years. "Axel didn't force me into this conspiracy. I want to be clear about that, even though we're blaming each other in court. I made my own evil choices. I destroyed everything good in my life, betrayed the 2 people who loved me most, all for $750,000 that I'll never see now anyway." Her final paragraph was the most surprising. "I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to visit or write back. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I am now, and I understand why you had to cut me out of your life to survive." I set the letter down and stared out at the red rocks. My mind flooded with memories. Part of me remembered the little girl I'd raised with such hope and love. Bedtime stories where I'd done different voices for all the characters, teaching her to ride her bicycle in our Scottsdale driveway, running alongside her until she found her balance. Her high school graduation, where she'd hugged me tight and whispered, "Thanks for believing in me, Dad." But those memories were now overshadowed by darker ones. Her cold voice saying we needed to get out of the way. Her calculated manipulation of neighbors and friends. The digitalis she'd used to slowly poison her own mother. "What does your heart tell you?" Bryn asked gently, recognizing the war playing out across my face. "My heart tells me she chose to become a stranger," I said finally. "The daughter I loved died the day she decided our deaths were worth more than our lives." Without another word, I tore the letter into small pieces and let the desert wind scatter them across our garden. Some relationships simply cannot survive attempted murder, regardless of blood ties or shared history. I gave her 35 years of unconditional love. I said, watching the paper fragments disappear among Bryn's flowers. She repaid it by planning our deaths for money. That's not mental illness or temporary desperation. That's evil, pure and simple. Bryn reached over and took my hand. "Are you at peace with this decision?" "Yes," I said, surprised by how certain I felt. "I'm done being her victim." Over these past months, I've learned lessons I never expected to need at 72 years old. I learned that family is about loyalty and love, not just shared DNA. Clay and Belle have shown us more genuine care in 6 months than Sky demonstrated in years. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous because they know exactly how to exploit your love and trust. But I also learned that you don't have to let them destroy your life in the name of family obligation. Bryn and I are 72 and 68 years old, and for the first time in years, we're genuinely free to be happy. We're not walking on eggshells, not second-guessing our own memories, not wondering which family members are plotting against us. We're just living simply and peacefully surrounded by people who actually care about our well-being. Looking back on this true story, I realize how blessed I am that God gave me the strength to survive my own daughter's betrayal. If you're watching these grandpa stories and recognizing similar warning signs in your own family, please don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't ignore the red flags when adult children suddenly become overly concerned about your declining health. Don't dismiss it when they start controlling your finances or isolating you from friends. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, because it probably is. The biggest lesson from my true story is this: toxic family members will use your love against you. They'll exploit your parental guilt, your desire to help, and your natural trust in blood relatives. But God didn't put us on this earth to be victims of our own children's greed. I spent months doubting my own memory, questioning my own judgment, because I couldn't believe my daughter would hurt me. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're losing your mind when you're actually being systematically abused. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. Elder abuse by family members is more common than most people realize. If you're experiencing financial manipulation, emotional abuse, or threats from relatives, reach out for help. Contact Adult Protective Services, talk to trusted friends, or call the Elder Abuse Hotline. Most importantly, remember that cutting toxic people out of your life isn't unforgiving, it's survival. God wants us to love ourselves enough to protect our own well-being. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your money, or your peace of mind, not even your own children. Trust in God's plan for your safety and happiness. He'll give you the wisdom to recognize danger and the courage to act on it. If this true story opened your eyes or touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life grandpa stories that could save your life or the life of someone you love. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who desperately need them. Thank you for being part of our community.